We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her.
What if the person this investigation has been looking for 114 days, is the wrong person entirely? An ex-FBI agent just said that publicly. She said the masked figure at Nancy Guthrie's door, the one on camera, the one the FBI released footage of, the one every analyst has spent 4 months focused on, may not be the main suspect. He may have just been the one who showed up. Because if she is right, and she is not guessing, she is applying decades of federal investigative experience to a specific criminal profile she has studied for years inside the Bureau, then the person who planned this crime has never appeared on a single camera, has never been named at a press conference, has been invisible to this investigation from the very beginning. And a retired detective who solved cases in this exact city just said something that makes that possibility even more disturbing. He said the suspect's name is probably already in the files, already submitted, already logged, sitting somewhere inside 50,000 tips collected since February 1st. His exact words, "I believe the suspect's names are in those 50,000. The question is if they can recognize it when they see it. The answer may already exist. The question is whether anyone has turned over the right rock." 114 days. No arrest. No named suspect. No confirmed proof of life. Tonight the picture of this investigation shifts. Not at the doorbell camera. Not at the blood trail. At the question of who actually designed this crime. And whether that person has been entirely outside the frame of this investigation while everyone else looked in the wrong direction. This is real crime uncovered. And this is what nobody else is telling you about the Nancy Guthrie case. Before we get into the theory that is reshaping this investigation, you need to know who Nancy Guthrie is. Not the headline. The person. Because nothing that follows means anything until you do. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She lives alone in the Catalina foothills, an upscale residential neighborhood on the northeastern edge of Tucson, Arizona. Quiet roads. Desert hills. The kind of place where an elderly woman living alone feels safe. Because it is supposed to be. She has a cardiac condition and a pacemaker, a device that monitors her heart and logs her movement continuously. She takes daily cardiac medication. The kind where missing a dose is not inconvenient. It is dangerous. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, NBC Today show anchor. That connection matters not as celebrity context but as investigative context. It tells you something about why this family may have been visible to people looking for a target. On the evening of January 31, 2026, Nancy had dinner at her daughter Annie's house. Annie's husband Tommaso Cioni drove her home afterward. He says he walked her to the door, confirmed she was safely inside, and drove away. Tommaso Cioni was the last known person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. His account stands entirely alone. No independent camera. No rideshare log. No third-party witness. Remember that. It becomes important later. By the following morning, Nancy had not shown up for an online church service. Family went to check on her. The house told the story before anyone said a word. Her phone, her wallet, her car, her walker, her hearing aids, her shoes, her cardiac medication, still on the counter. Exactly where she left it. She did not pack a bag. She did not make a choice. She did not leave. She was taken. The pacemaker logged its last movement data at 2:28 in the morning. The blood trail from her front porch led to the curb and stopped, at the exact position where a vehicle would need to be parked for a person to be loaded into it. In those first hours, Annie Guthrie stood inside her mother's house and told investigators directly, Nancy could not have walked away on her own. Everything she would have taken is still here. Look around. Investigators were still treating it as a possible elderly wandering case. Annie was right from the very first minute, and they were not listening. That detail matters. Because Annie's knowledge of those streets, dismissed in the first hours, becomes one of the most forensically significant contributions to this entire investigation. We will get to exactly how. 4 major television networks independently confirmed through separate law enforcement sources that the suspect visited Nancy's property multiple times before the night she was taken. January 11th, flagged by Sheriff Nanos himself as significant. January 24th, a separate date of investigative interest confirmed by neighbors asked to provide footage. And possibly January 30th, the night before she disappeared. Multiple visits, multiple dates, over multiple weeks. This is not impulse. This is reconnaissance. And it raises the question the Coffin Daffer revelation makes genuinely urgent. Does that level of preparation fit a lone operative acting independently? Or does it fit something organized? Something designed? Something that begins not at a doorbell camera but somewhere else entirely? Let us get into that. Because the answer changes not just who investigators are looking for. It changes what kind of crime this actually was. Her name is Jennifer Coffin-Daffer, former FBI agent. Years inside the bureau studying organized financial crime. Not a television personality. Someone who spent her career watching how criminal networks operate, how they recruit, how they communicate, how they disappear. She looked at this case and recognized something specific. She wrote publicly, "Do you know what a wrench attack is? Most people do not. So here is what it is." Because once you understand it, the Nancy Guthrie case looks fundamentally different. A wrench attack is a specific form of cryptocurrency extortion. Instead of hacking digitally, criminal networks use something older. Physical threat. Violence. Kidnapping. They identify a target with perceived wealth or a family connection to wealth. They gain access to that person and use that access to extract cryptocurrency passwords, wallet credentials, seed phrases, digital keys to financial accounts that once transferred cannot be recovered. These crimes are not random. They are researched. They are planned. They are executed through a structure that makes them extraordinarily difficult to trace. A mastermind identifies the target, recruits an operative through encrypted online channels. The operative and the mastermind may never meet in person, may never speak on an unencrypted line, may exist to each other only as usernames in a dark web forum. The operative shows up, does what they were sent to do, and the mastermind, the person who designed the entire operation, remains invisible. Coffin-Daffer said it directly. The puppet masters in these crimes are sophisticated. Now think about this case through that lens. The ransom notes were sent to media outlets, not to the family, not to law enforcement, to journalists. A mastermind operating through encrypted channels does not send a ransom demand directly to a family because direct communication creates a traceable thread. You send it to the press. Maximize public pressure. Maintain distance from every communication law enforcement might intercept. And the Bitcoin wallet, created, attached to the demand, sent to journalists and never touched. Not one transaction in 114 days. Either the perpetrators cannot access it safely without triggering a blockchain trace, or the money was never really the point. Both are consistent with an organized network that understands exactly how cryptocurrency forensics work. The Pima County Sheriff's Department issued a formal response. They have not received any reports referencing wrench attacks in their community. The investigation remains active. Read that carefully. It does not say the theory has been investigated and ruled out. It says they have not received reports referencing it. Those are different things. And the fact that this theory gained enough traction to require an official response tells you something about how seriously the forensic community is taking it. But here is where it gets complicated. Retired FBI profiler Jim Clemente looked at the blood pattern on Nancy's porch and reached a conclusion that sits in direct tension with the wrench ring theory. He said the perpetrator was bumbling his way through this. He made mistakes. He is not a sophisticated criminal. A hired foot soldier dispatched by a sophisticated network does not bumble. He executes. Unless the mastermind deliberately chose an unsophisticated operative. Because an amateur's mistakes create forensic noise, the kind that forces law enforcement to chase threads leading nowhere while the real trail goes cold. What if the bumbling is not incompetence? What if the bumbling is the camouflage? Both assessments can be simultaneously true. An unsophisticated operative. A sophisticated network. The clumsiness in the execution. The precision in the design. Occupying the same crime at the same time. And if that is the architecture of what happened to Nancy Guthrie, finding the figure at the door was never going to be enough. Because the figure at the door was never the answer. He was just the one who showed up. But here is what both theories agree on completely. The vehicle. The one that left Nancy's curb between 2:12 and 2:28 in the morning. The one the figure covered the camera specifically to hide. Not to conceal his face. A mask handled that. To conceal the car. Because the car leads to a registered owner. To an address. To a name. And a map that Annie Guthrie drew in the first desperate hours of this investigation has just produced one of the most significant geographic correlations in this entire case. Let us talk about that map. And the footage. And a black box that sat in forensic impound for 40 days whose findings have never been publicly confirmed. Because the vehicle is the thread this investigation has not finished pulling. January 31st, 5:32 in the afternoon. Nancy requested an Uber from her home in the Catalina foothills. The driver picked her up and drove her to Annie's house for dinner. Documented. Time-stamped. verifiable. And it passed through streets where the operative may have already been positioned, watching, confirming she was leaving, preparing. Some Uber vehicles run front-facing and rear-facing cameras simultaneously. Even those without dedicated cameras produce data, trip logs, timestamps at intersections, records of where the vehicle slowed and what surrounded it at every moment of that drive. If the operative was already in that neighborhood confirming Nancy's departure, the Uber drove directly through the middle of a crime scene already being prepared. The answer to who did this might be sitting in the background of footage from a rideshare that drove right past him. That footage exists. The question is whether anyone has examined it frame by frame with the right question. But the Uber footage is only one piece, because there is something else. Something that came not from a federal database. Something that came from a daughter at a kitchen table in the first desperate hours after her mother disappeared, drawing a map from memory, because nobody in law enforcement was asking the right questions. Here is what Nancy Guthrie's hand-drawn map produced. Investigative reporter Dave Mack took that map and cross-referenced it against Ring camera footage of a vehicle spotted on Camino Royale, 2.5 miles from Nancy's home, at 2:36 in the morning on February 1st. 6 minutes after the pacemaker data stopped at 2:28 a.m. 6 minutes of driving time from the curb where the blood ends. When that map was overlaid against the Camino Royale footage, the road where that vehicle was spotted falls directly within the corridor Annie identified. Without access to the Ring camera footage, without knowing about the vehicle at 2:36, she independently traced a route geographically consistent with where that vehicle appeared. That is not coincidence. That is local knowledge confirming physical evidence. Annie drew that map in the first terrible hours of this investigation because she knew those streets. She drove them regularly. She knew where the quiet roads were and where the camera coverage was sparse. And the woman that investigators dismissed, the same woman who told them in the first hours that Nancy could not have walked away, got the escape route right. Along that corridor, Lulu Walker Elementary School sits with overlapping perimeter cameras covering the street from multiple angles. At 2:30 in the morning, one vehicle against an empty road is dramatically easier to isolate than daytime traffic. No visual noise. A vehicle passing at that hour stands out completely. Make, model, color, partial plate, all potentially visible in a way daylight footage would never allow. At every intersection along that route, the driver had to slow down. Stop signs, traffic lights. You cannot drive through a residential neighborhood at 2 a.m. at speed. The vehicle slows. And when it slows, cameras get their clearest look. One vehicle, one corridor, multiple cameras. Nancy Guthrie drew the map that identifies where those cameras are. Nancy Guthrie's Honda CR-V was impounded by law enforcement in February and held for over 40 days. The family has been publicly cleared. But 40 days is not routine. That is the timeline of investigators looking for something specific. Every Honda CR-V has a navigation system logging routes and timestamps. Every modern vehicle has an event data recorder, a black box, capturing speed, braking, door openings, trunk access, engine status, and location data, continuously, regardless of whether anyone knows it is running. Tommaso Cioni drove Nancy home on January 31st. He says he walked her to the door and drove away. His account stands alone. No independent camera. No rideshare log. No third-party witness. But the Honda CR-V knows where it went. It knows what time it moved. It knows whether any doors opened after Tommaso says he drove home. Whether the vehicle made additional stops. Whether the vehicle made additional stops. Whether it was anywhere near Nancy Street between her drop-off and the moment the doorbell camera went dark at 1:47 in the morning. At that exact moment, 1:47 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker registered a spike. The physiological signature of a conscious person experiencing sudden acute terror. She was there. It happened exactly where the evidence says it happened. The car was watching the whole time. Every car is watching all the time. 40 days of forensic examination suggests investigators were looking for exactly this kind of data. What they found has never been publicly confirmed. And that silence is its own kind of data. The vehicle that carried Nancy away left traces along Annie's route it cannot retrieve. The digital record exists. It cannot be erased. Regardless of how organized the network that sent that vehicle was. The car drove through those streets. The cameras were running. The data exists. And now, with the vehicle established as the central thread, we can build the profile of the mind behind this crime. Not the figure at the door. The one who sent him. The preparation behind this crime is a confession. Not to investigators. To anyone willing to read it correctly. The suspect was at Nancy's front door on January 11th. 3 weeks before she was taken. A masked figure confirmed by multiple law enforcement sources on her front steps. Investigators also flagged January 24th as a separate date of interest, asking neighbors for footage from that specific night. Multiple visits. Multiple dates. Over multiple weeks. This is not impulse. This is reconnaissance. CNN's chief law enforcement analyst said it directly. The multiple visits fit with the investigative assumption that this abduction was planned in advance and involved pre-operational surveillance and reconnaissance. Pre-operational. That is the language of an organized operation. Now look at the countermeasures. The camera was covered not to hide a face. A mask already handled that. It was covered to hide the vehicle. That decision reflects an understanding of law enforcement vehicle identification methodology that goes beyond ordinary criminal instinct. A masked face on surveillance footage is a problem. A vehicle on the same footage leads to a registered owner within 24 hours. Whoever planned this understood that distinction before they arrived. Retired Detective Robbie Mayer, the man who solved the primetime rapist case in this exact city, said this week what deserves to be heard clearly. He said, "These guys came prepared not to leave hair or DNA. Look at how that guy was clothed. They turned off their cell phones. Before arriving. Specifically to avoid cell tower location tracking. That is not instinctive behavior. That is learned. Counterforensic preparation carried out before the operation began. And it worked. The unknown contributor DNA recovered from Nancy's home produced no matches in Cody's, the FBI's national database of criminal offenders. That failure is behavioral evidence. These people understood standard DNA matching methodology and took deliberate steps to complicate it." Mayer was direct about the implication. Most of the time investigators try to find patterns. They cannot find them in this case. If Coffindaffer is right, the designer of this crime looks like this. Knowledge of cryptocurrency forensics. Access to a decentralized encrypted recruitment network. Understanding of counterforensic methodology and media pressure mechanics. Possibly operating from another state. Possibly another country. Entirely invisible to 114 days of investigation. If Clementi is also right, if the operative was bumbling, not sophisticated, those two profiles do not contradict each other. They complete each other. A sophisticated network. An unsophisticated foot soldier. Precision in the planning. Clumsiness in the execution. And here is the investigative implication nobody is saying plainly enough. If the foot soldier is identified, through the vehicle, through the DNA, through the tips, catching him does not end this investigation. It begins the next phase. The phase where investigators have to reach from the operative back to the network that sent him. And in organized financial crime cases, that reach is often harder than finding the operative was. Mayer also theorized that more than one person was involved. Possibly connected to a theft group active in Phoenix approximately 2 years ago that targeted elderly people with money. A group with a pattern. And pattern recognition is exactly what breaks organized crime networks open. An 84-year-old woman. Living alone. Tending her garden. Going to church on Sunday mornings. Having dinner with her daughter and son-in-law on the evening of January 31st. And the possibility, raised by a former federal agent and supported by a retired detective with 40 years of experience in this jurisdiction, that she was selected not through any personal connection to whoever did this. Not because of anything she said or did or knew. But because a criminal network identified her family's public profile from a distance and decided she was a viable access point. The thought of that is one of the most disturbing things in a case already full of disturbing things. The puppet master still invisible. The network still unidentified. And it connects directly to the most important statement made about this case in months. The answer may already be in the files. And understanding why comes down to one number. 50,000. Robbie Mayer is not a commentator. He is the retired Pima County Sheriff's detective who solved Tucson's most notorious serial crime case, the primetime rapist, in 1986. In this exact city. Using this exact kind of tip volume. He knows what 50,000 leads looks like from the inside of an investigation. He knows what it means when the answer is already there and nobody has found it yet. Because that is exactly what happened in the primetime rapist case. The suspect's name, Brian LaRiva, was already in the files. Already submitted. Already logged. Sitting unprocessed while the investigation continued around it. The case broke only when someone turned over the right rock. Now there are 50,000 rocks. Mayer said it directly, I believe the suspects' names are in those 50,000. The question is if they can recognize it when they see it. Being in a case like this is like being in a field with rocks and what you are looking for is under one rock. You just have to keep turning. Somewhere under one of those 50,000 rocks, if Meyer's forensic instinct built from 40 years in this jurisdiction is correct, is the name of whoever took Nancy Guthrie. Already submitted. Already logged. Waiting. This investigation has reached a level most missing person cases never touch. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche addressed this case directly on national television. He acknowledged the reported friction between the FBI and the Sheriff's Department. Then he said something that deserves to be understood for what it means. President Trump personally authorized and directed the FBI to do everything possible to help this investigation. A presidential authorization. Directed at a single missing person case in Tucson, Arizona. This is not a local investigation anymore. And what that means for whoever did this, wherever they are, however well they planned their exit, is something Brian Fitzgibbons, a former Marine and Security Operations Director who has spent years finding and extracting missing people, said plainly. The FBI controls the game clock, not the perpetrator. They cannot erase the digital record, cannot undrive the route, cannot delete frames from cameras along Annie's corridor, cannot remove their name from 50,000 tips. The FBI has unlimited time, unlimited resources, and the investigative capability that has broken cases far more complex than this one. The same sheriff who told People magazine, when the labs tell us there is nothing else they can do, maybe we have a cold case, told a local news station weeks later, I believe at some point in time we will make an arrest on this case. Cold case. An arrest coming. Same man. Different interviews. Weeks apart. One of them reflects where this investigation actually stands. And here is the detail that makes that question urgent. The sheriff confirmed evidence is being withheld from the public. His exact words? It is not done because we have to keep it secret. It is done because we have to protect our case. There is evidence that cannot be discussed publicly yet, because discussing it would compromise what comes next. And what comes next, if the arrest statement means anything, is a prosecution. And one more institutional detail worth naming. The DNA was first sent by the Sheriff's Department to a private laboratory in Florida before it ever reached Quantico. The FBI had requested that material weeks earlier. That delay, in a case where every day matters, is one more consequence of the conflict that has defined this investigation from the beginning. The digital record cannot be erased. The answer may already exist. And somewhere in 50,000 tips the right rock is still waiting to be turned. There is a house in the Catalina foothills where the medication is still on the counter. Exactly where she left it. There is a pacemaker still running somewhere. Still logging. Still keeping count of every moment since 2:28 in the morning on February 1st. The device that monitors a heartbeat does not know that the person wearing it has been gone for 114 days. It only knows what it has always known. Movement or stillness. Presence or absence. And it is still counting. There is a daughter who drew a map in the first terrible hours and traced a route that holds up forensically against evidence she never had access to. There is a retired detective who solved a case in this city before and is quietly confident the answer already exists. There is a presidential authorization of federal resources. A reward of $1,200,000 unclaimed for 114 days. And there is a question that has not changed since February 1st. Where is Nancy Guthrie? If the figure at the door was dispatched, who sent him? What did the Honda CR-V's black box record in the hours after Nancy was dropped home? And is the name of whoever did this, the operative, the puppet master, or both, already filed somewhere in 50,000 tips waiting for someone to turn over the right rock? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the unanswered center of this investigation. The footage is out there. The vehicle is in it. The route has been identified. The DNA is at Quantico. The game clock belongs to the FBI. Nancy Guthrie raised her children. She tended her garden. She went to church. She had dinner with her family on January 31st and went home. And the device inside her chest is still running. Still keeping count. She deserves to come home. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, the number is 1-800-CALL-FBI. Completely anonymous. The reward is $1,200,000 and it remains unclaimed. That number again. 1-800-CALL-FBI. If this is your first video on this channel, Video 1 covers everything about the night of January 31st, the pacemaker data, the cold case warning, and the institutional conflict. Link is in the description. Watch it. The two videos together give you the complete picture. The DNA result window is open right now. When something breaks in this case, we will be here first. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because when this case moves, and it will move, You do not want to find out from someone else's thumbnail 3 days later. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Porch Guy was a hired operative? Do you think the suspect name is already in those 50,000 tips? Do you think the FBI is closer to a breakthrough than anyone is saying publicly? Tell us what you think. Every comment keeps Nancy's story visible. Stay with us.